Hello guys, this is Paul McWhorter with TalkTechBoy.com, and we're here today with episode number 28 in our incredible new tutorial series where you're going to learn Fusion 360 or you're going to die trying. What I'm going to need you to do is pour yourself a nice tall glass of ice cold coffee. That would be straight up black coffee poured over ice. No sugar, no sweeteners, none needed. And as you're pouring your coffee, as always, I want to give a shout out to you guys who are helping me out over at Patreon. It is your support and your encouragement that keeps this great content coming. You guys that are not helping out yet, take a look down in the description. There is a link over to my Patreon account. Think about hopping on over there and hooking a brother up. But enough of this shameless self-promotion. Let's talk about what I am going to teach you today. And what I'm going to do today is I'm going to show you my solution to the homework assignment that I gave you in lesson number 27. And that homework assignment was to create a parameterized model for a terracotta flower pot, or you could think of it as a seedling cup. And the reason I gave you this assignment was really for three things. The first is it allows you to become more familiar with the Revolve tool that I taught you in lesson number 27. The second thing is it's good practice and review for using good parametric design techniques in your designs. And thirdly, it's something that could actually be useful. I'm over here living in Africa where you can't buy flower pots or little seedling cups, and I needed some, so I thought that would be a great homework assignment and something that I could actually print and use around the garden. And so those were kind of the three reasons that I chose that. Now, how many of you guys were successful with this assignment? If you were successful, leave a comment down below. I am legend. Or if you were not successful, leave a comment down below. I folded up like a cheap Walmart lawn chair. Or the third category, I never even entered the arena. And that is for you guys out there that see the homework assignment but just think you'll wait and see my solution and do that. You guys really need to try to do the homework without watching me, because it looks easy when I do it, but the real question is, can you do it without having watched me do it first, if that makes sense? Okay, anyway, enough of this introductory banter. It is time to jump in, and so I will get out of your way. I will fire up Fusion 360, and I will have a little sip of my jet fuel here. All right, now since this homework assignment was to do a parameterized model, and just to remind you, we wanted to do something like a terracotta pot, or if you thought of this as being smaller, you could think of it as being a little seed starting or seedling cup, and that's kind of the way I was thinking of it as far as the dimensions I use. But you got to think about your parameters, and that's the most important thing in a homework assignment like this, is to have the fewest parameters possible, but no fewer. Okay, so don't just go in and start adding a bunch of dimensions when you can create relationships where that sort of thing will be taken care of for you. So when I looked at that, I know there's a hole in the bottom, so I'm going to make the hole in the bottom hole radius. Okay, then there is a bottom radius, like how wide is the thing at the bottom radius. There's a top radius, which is usually bigger than the bottom radius, but you can set that. Bottom radius, top radius, and then a thickness of the wall, and a height. And those are the 5 parameters that I'm thinking about. So I want to go ahead and I want to start by setting up those parameters. So I'm going to come here to modify, and I am going to say change parameters, and I'm going to put these things in real quick. We come over to user parameters, hit the plus, and let's just kind of go in order. There was hole radius, so I'm going to put hole R like that, and I think I want my hole radius to be about 5 millimeters. We can change the numbers later, but just make sure that you get the parameters in here, and then we can adjust the values later. All right, I want a height of the overall thing, so I'll just call that simply height. I'm going to make mine about 100 millimeters on height, And then what we also know is we want the thickness. I'm going to set my thickness, since I'm making this in plastic and not clay, I'm going to set it to 3 millimeters, which is kind of thin. Okay. And then what I am going to do is I'm now going to have my bottom radius, bottom R, and I think I'll set that at 35 millimeters. And now I'm going to create top R for top radius, and I think I'll make that about 50 millimeters like that and say okay. And I think I have 5 parameters. That's what I wanted. Now I will come up and I will create a sketch. Now this time we want the bottom to be on the red-green plane, which is the XY plane, but I want to design, because I want to revolve around that Z-axis, I want to design in the red-blue plane, which is going to be the XZ plane. So I'm going to select that XZ plane rather deliberately there, like that. Okay, now I'm going to come in and start putting some construction lines in that will then allow me to design very easily. Now, as we're building parameterized models, it's really important for us to go back and be disciplined and be very deliberate about position and dimension, and to be very deliberate to keep our sketch fully constrained. So I'm going to open up my little sketch icon here, and I want to make sure that I'm keeping this fully constrained, meaning that there's that little lock there. So let's start putting in some helper construction lines. So I want to come over here for line type and select construction. And the first thing is I want that hole in the bottom. So I'm going to build me a construction line. I'll hover over the origin, click to it, and I want to come out how far? Hole R for hole radius. Okay. And then that puts that in at 5. Now I'm going to come in and I'm going to put my height in. So I click and snap to the origin. I'm going to come up how far? Height, like that. Enter. All right, I'll back off a little bit. That's pretty tall up there, isn't it? Height 100. Now I'm going to come in and put in my bottom radius, hover over the origin, let it snap, click, come out how far? Bottom R. Okay, enter, enter. And so now that's bottom radius. And now I'm going to come up here and I am going to click over the top of my height construction line, come out how far? I'm going to come out top R for top radius this time. Okay, so I've got top radius, I've got height, I've got my hole radius, and then I have my bottom radius. Okay, I think now we're ready to come in and start drawing. And so now I'm going to get a line. I'm going to turn off construction line because I want these to be real lines, like line lines. So I'm going to start now. I'm going to start here at the edge of the hole. I'm going to hover there so it snaps, click, and then come out to the end of the construction line, hover and click, and look at that. I am fully constrained, so it knows to snap to those 2 points. I'm fully constrained. Now what I need to do is I need to come up here, and I'm going to go from the edge of the outside, hover, let it snap, click, and then I'm going to come up here to the outside of the top radius and click. All right, let's move this out of the way. Say select, let's move this dimension out of the way, this dimension out of the way, so that you don't confuse those dimension lines with actual lines. Now you can see this is starting to look like the outside profile of a flower pot, but I need the inside profile. I could come in and draw the inside, but I think the easier way is for me to say modify and just do an offset. It looks like I'm going to try to select the offset. If I point here, it looks like it would select that line. If I point here, it's going to select both lines. So I want both lines, so I can select here, and I have both lines. Do I want it by 1 millimeter? No, I want it offset by how much? By the thickness, like that, with a parameter. Boom. So that looks really nice. Now I want you to zoom in and see how this is not lined up with my construction line, but we're going to fix that later, so don't worry about that little thing. When we clean that up in a minute, we will take care of that. What I want to do is, if we're going to revolve, I got to create a face, a closed face. So let's go ahead and put a real line here, not a construction line. Hover and click, come down, hover and click, and notice that we are still fully constrained as indicated by the happy little lock icon. This is looking good. Now we've got to kind of finish up this top part. Now, you know, I kind of want a lip on here coming around. So let's start building that lip. I'm going to get my solid construction line. I'm going to hover over that point. I'm going to click and I'm going to come out staying horizontal. And I want this to come out how far? Thickness, like that. Okay. And then I'm going to say enter, enter. And that is rather an unusual, unexpected result. And so I'm going to go back, because you see it wanted to make that perpendicular, which is not what I wanted. So I'm going to try that again. It wanted to make it perpendicular to this line, and I wanted it horizontal. So I'm going to click, I'm going to come out, and I'm going to say thickness. I'm going to say use that. And then I'm going to come up and I'm going to tab over to get to the degrees, and I'm going to put 0 degrees so that that is locked in the horizontal position. I thought it would lock it into the horizontal position. Sometimes Fusion 360 fights with me, but we will prevail. So I backed up. I'm going to come here and I'm going to come out by thickness. Okay, I'm going to say use that parameter, and then I'm going to tab over to degrees. I'm going to say 0 degrees, enter. Okay, so it's fighting with me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, you see this perpendicular? It really wanted to make that perpendicular. So I'm going to take that out. And now this, I've got to come in again and tell it thickness, because did you see what that did? That changed that to a, it changed it to a number as opposed to the parameter. And now I'm going to take this and I'm going to say I want that to be horizontal vertical. Okay, now I'm happy. Now I'm happy. Why am I happy? Because this is locked into the horizontal, and this is the parameter fx3, which is the thickness. Be careful if it takes, and instead of using a parameter, if it turns the parameter thickness into the number 3, which it was doing earlier, be careful of that. And I'm doing this to just kind of show you some of the quirky little things that you can run into in Fusion 360 sometimes and have to fix. Okay, now let's go on and try to finish that upper lip. So I'm going to click here to this point. I'm going to come up and I'm going to say thickness for that parameter. Okay. And look at it, it did that again. Do you see how it's turning my parameters into numbers? Let's try this again. Okay, I'm going to click on user parameter thickness, enter. Okay, and that time I got the FX. If you don't get the FX, go back and put it in again. And I don't know why sometimes it does that, but your model will break if you end up with the number 3 as opposed to the parameter thickness, which is set to 3. Okay, now I've got to get this connected with this to kind of finish it up. But because this is fully constrained, this thing is kind of locked in. It is kind of locked in. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make kind of 2 goofy lines. I'm going to make a line from here to here. Okay, and now I'm going to make a line from here to here. Why do I draw them goofy? So that I don't end up with constraints that I didn't know about. Okay, so those are 2 lines. Now, what's one thing? I know that this line I want to be what? Collinear with this line. So I'm going to come down and I am going to say collinear. I want this line collinear with that one. All right, now what do I want? I want this line to be collinear to that one. Let me try again. Collinear with, nope, that's not a line, that's a dimension. So forget that. What I want it to be is I want this to be perpendicular to this. So the constraint that I will get is perpendicular, and I want this perpendicular to this. Okay, now it's not fully constrained, and that is good. Why is it not fully constrained? Because this point cannot go up and down, but it can go left and right. And this point cannot go left and right because it's constrained to be collinear, but it can go along that line. So what do I want to do? I want to make coincident. I want to make coincident this point and that point, and shazam, look at that. Fully constrained, and things are set with parameters. So the fx means that's a parameter. That's a parameter. I just got to go back and look at the dimensions and make sure that they all have that fx, meaning that it didn't do that wonky thing of turning the parameter into the number. Okay, that looks good. So we're going to say finish sketch. Have a little sip of jet fuel there. Now, what do we want to do? We want to turn this into a little seedling cup. And so who is your friend? Your friend is Revolve. What do I want to revolve? I want to revolve this profile. I want to revolve it around the z-axis. And I'm just going to do like a 90-degree because I want to look at this. We'll come in and we'll fix it later, but I want to be able to look at the cross section so I see if my model is really working. So I'm going to say okay. All right, so now let's go in and let's play with our parameters. So I'm going to come in and say modify change parameter, and the most likely way you could break this is probably by changing the thickness, and so I'm going to change the thickness to 10. Shazam, look at that, it got thicker all the way around. Let's go back to 5. Oops, that was 35. I'm sorry, 35. I didn't want to change that one. Let's come back here to thickness and make it 5. And then click off. That looks good. And then what we actually had it set at was 3. And having it set at 3 looks pretty good. Now what I can also play around with is the whole radius. Let's make that 7. See if that changes. Yeah, boom, you see that worked. And then what we can do is we can come in and let's say that we want to make it squattier. So on the height, instead of 100, let's make it 50. Okay, look at that. Okay, let's make that 75. I think 75 looks pretty good. Let's make the bottom radius 40. And then let's make the top radius 55, something like that. Okay, that looks like a pretty slick seedling cup for my needs. Now, what do I need to do? I need to go ahead and complete that revolve. I wanted to do this just because I can visualize it a little better, but now I'm going to come in and I'm going to edit that feature. You can't see that, can you? So let me turn that off. And you see I can come down here to this revolve icon on my timeline. I can right mouse click on it and I can say edit feature. And then it brings me back to that feature, if that makes sense. Okay. Now what we want to do is we want to do a full revolve of 360 degrees, and then boom, look at that. Now I think that is a little bit too big now that I look at the full revolve. And so I'm going to go back, I'm going to right mouse click, I'm going to edit my sketch. And then what I am going to want to do is not edit my sketch. Sorry. I want to edit my parameters. The whole point of this lesson was to change my parameters. So I think it's too fat. So my top radius, I want to set it about, let's say 30. And then I want my bottom radius to be about 20, like that. Okay. Let's make it 35. And let's make it 25. Okay, I think that is just a perfect little seedling cup. I think the hole is too big now that I look at it. And so I'm going to modify. My parameters. And I think that hole would probably be better at about 4. Yeah, that looks good. Okay, look at that. Is that not a perfect little seedling cup? And the slick thing is I could go from a seedling cup, a small seedling cup, to a big seedling cup, to a big flower pot, just by changing my parameters. Is that pretty neat? And like I say, the whole purpose of this is to actually print something useful for me. And what I did before I started, I had kind of done this, and then I went ahead and saved it and sliced it. And what you can see here from this most excellent view, you can see that I'm actually printing out the most lovely flower pot. Okay, guys, give me feedback. Was this a pretty slick lesson or what? So we did that nice glasses case that was completely parameterized, so we can kind of make any little box any size we want based on parameters. Now we have a little seed cup or a flower pot that we can make any size that we want based on parameters. And we've become familiar with our friend, our Revolve tool. And if you go back and look at last week's lesson, I show you all types of slick ways that you can use the Revolve tool. Okay, what your homework assignment is to go ahead and do this, and then to create some models and print them. Because in these lessons, what I do is I give you several lessons on improving your design skills. As you are designing more complicated things, you have to improve your print skills. So I'm kind of giving several lessons on printing, then several lessons on design, several lessons on printing, several lessons on design. So the next few lessons are going to be on design, and then we'll come back and I'll show you more tips and tricks on your 3D printer. But just to stay in good practice, you guys need to make one of these and you need to design it. I saw a boat zipping by there. Okay, we've gotten a little few fishermen and various people on the river. Always love looking out there at the rivers. Okay, guys, I hope you're enjoying taking these lessons as much as I am making them. If you enjoyed the lesson, be sure to give us a thumbs up. Also, leave a comment down below. That helps us with the old YouTube juice. If you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to the channel. When you subscribe to the channel, make sure you ring that bell so you'll get notification of my future lessons when they're released. And as always, share this lesson with your friends and family, because the world needs more people doing engineering and design work and fewer people sitting around watching silly cat videos. Paul McWhorter with TopTechBoy.com. I will talk to you guys later.